everyone. Welcome back to Psyber-Conversations. My name is Josh. I've got Vern, my friend, here with me, and today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom
Episode
Menace.
1, The
This
Phantom Menace.
movie was released in 1999. Uh, I've been looking forward to this. This is the one that I think divides us probably the most. Um,
Doesn't it divide everybody the most?
It may divide most people the most. I haven't done any research on it, but I would guess.
Yeah.
I know I can tell you that when the movie first came out, it was extremely divisive.
Exciting.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about afterward. The fans were very divided. There were a lot of people who loved it, but there were also a lot of people who hated it. And I mean like a lot of vitriol toward it. And then several years later, they started revisiting it and thinking about it, and over time, a lot of those feelings have changed, and now a lot of people love it. It's a
Yeah, I
lo-
was fully a grown up when everything first came out, and I definitely do not remember the vitriol. I remember there being mixed reviews, but for the most part, it was really well received, and it was extremely well hyped. Probably the most hyped event in cinema history, as far as I'm concerned, over the last half a century. Probably more hype than what we experienced when like Endgame came out.
oh, definitely. It was
Yeah.
extremely hyped, even where I worked at the
And it was
time.
geniusly released right after the special editions too. So
Yep,
bam, bam,
yeah.
bam, we just got Star Wars injected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they were already working on it by the time they released the special editions, so they knew it was going to
Of
come
course,
out, and
yeah, of course.
that's why they did it that way. And yeah,
The same
it's a good way
CGI
to
that
do
they
it.
were using for the prequels, they actually used to make the special editions. So from the episode 4 when it was released in the 90s, it was already full of advanced special effects that really enhanced. Well, that's also debatable, but I feel they really enhanced the original. You know, Lucas always felt like his hands were tied because of the technology of the time. So I think it's perfectly fair that the technology that he really innovated for all of Hollywood to grab onto as their mainstay. I think it was really cool that he got to use those to repaint the original vision and then re-release them a little bit closer to what he originally envisioned instead of what he was stuck with.
It's something that actually literally is just occurring to me now because we have never discussed it before. But if the listeners to the show are interested, I said fans like we actually have like some kind of huge following. We've got 12 subscribers
It's
as of the
prophetic, Josh. It's
recording.
prophetic.
Yeah.
In
Um,
2028, there's a huge following.
if people want, let us know in the comments. I would wonder if we should do an episode dedicated specifically to the changes made in the special editions from the theatrical releases in the
That's an
original
interesting
trilogy.
idea. I think I've got a lot to share. I think maybe one episode would probably cover all three of them, but I
Oh yeah, yeah,
definitely think
yeah.
we can carry a 45-minute conversation on that subject alone. Absolutely.
Definitely. There's because I think we both have opinions. The only thing that I'm not sure about is whether we have different opinions. Um,
That would be interesting to explore, would it not?
Yeah, yeah. And actually, that brings to mind something that I did want to reiterate. Just for those of you who don't know about the show, the reason that I did this is because I noticed over the past several years how much the division between fans has been growing in the Star Wars fandom and in many different fandoms, not just Star Wars, on things like on platforms like social media and other online things, but even in person to a degree people have always disagreed about which one they like the most or which trilogy they like the most. But it used to be there was a time when it was just playful teasing. Oh, you like this one? Well, that's funny. But now it's turned into like full blown bullying, derision, anger, rage, um, all of the stuff of the dark side. And I have a theory that a lot of it has to do with when people talk about what episode is their favorite or what series is their favorite, which trilogy is their favorite. They're trying to persuade the other people to change their mind and to come around to their way of thinking. And statistically speaking, that just doesn't happen very often. Um, and I think that can be very frustrating for people, and I think that's why they get very angry. And so, a big part of what I want to do with this show is to show everyone that we can disagree without there being any hate. We are not trying to convince the other. We're being very careful not to make our persuasive arguments that type of persuasive. I'm not trying to convince Vern to change his mind about a movie, and he's not trying to convince me to change my mind about a movie. We are just simply discussing and learning from each other what it is that we like and what it is that we don't like. And we both learn those things, so we have a different point of view, but we are not intending to change someone's mind. In the case of the Phantom Menace, this is my least favorite Star Wars movie, and it's one of I don't know if it's not your favorite, but I know that you love it. He's not going to try to convince me to make it my favorite movie, and I'm not going to try to convince him to lower his how much he likes the movie. We're simply discussing it, and I'm going to learn what he likes so much about the movie. He's going to learn what I don't like, and we'll come away that much better for it. But there's no arguments because there's no need.
The
Um,
vitriol that we share amongst each other over a piece of entertainment in our culture, and it could be American culture, it could be global pop culture, but that vitriol is one of 100 reasons why the world sucks as much as you think it do.
yeah,
Whoever's listening to me. Reason why you think the world sucks, if you do, a big part of the reason is this solvable problem that we can analyze and we can come to an understanding on and maybe change a little of our minds so that we are thinking in a different sense. And so comparing two different opinions and dealing with it as old friends is a good way to demonstrate how there is nothing wrong with pineapple on pizza. There's nothing wrong with pizza without pineapple, but it's a taste thing, it's a palate thing. So it isn't something that we tribalize on and then throw stones at each other.
and especially with something like Star Wars, I've said this many times. One of the things that I love so much about Star Wars, and I think this is true for a lot of people, is how it inspires conversation. Whether you like a movie or not, you come away with it with your own opinions and thoughts and what you liked about it and what you didn't like. And then you find your friends and you discuss it about them. And or at least that's how I was. I remember many times as a kid leaving a movie theater with my friends and saying, "Oh, did you see that part about this? And could you believe it? That was so amazing." And then this other thing happened, and that was kind of silly. You know, this was discussions that we could have. And Star Wars is a perfect example of a movie or a series of movies that you can discuss in a friendly way. And just because someone doesn't like the same ones that you do or doesn't like them as much, doesn't mean that you're not, it doesn't mean that you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that they're wrong. So that's, a big part of why I wanted to create this show. Um,
Public disclaimer:
which one? What?
the one
Oh,
you
oh,
just
oh,
did.
yes, yes. Then I got confused and um, so getting back on track, we're going to try to keep this a lot more focused because uh, I do know that we tend to get off topic very quickly and very often. A lot of times it is in service of our discussion of the movie, but still I'm trying to keep us a bit on topic this time. So, without any other obstacles, oh, actually, one quick thing to let you guys know. Um, One of the episodes before, we were discussing whether or not George Lucas uh, had actually written the entire Star Wars saga before it ever came out, and we were wondering if there was anything that I could find. I did find one thing. I don't know if this is proof of anything, but just to address that, George Lucas apparently wrote a letter to the creator of Lost, to the executive producers, and he said in that, Congratulations on pulling off an amazing show. Don't tell anyone, but when Star Wars first came out, I didn't know where it was going either. The trick is to pretend you've planned the whole thing out in advance. Throw in some father issues and references to other stories. Let's call them homages, and you've got a series. I don't know if that proves anything, but I thought that was pretty cool. I'm not saying that Star Wars was not planned out way in advance. But there are things that I'm sure George Lucas didn't have the exact story as it is now written beforehand. Um, and that's all there is to say about that. So, Star Wars Episode One: The Phantom Menace. You want to start? This
Yeah,
is
sure. I
this
mean,
is I
it
know
all starts with what?
well I know this is one
Go.
of your favorites, but I don't know if I know that Return of the Jedi is your favorite one, but is this your second favorite, or are you sure? Do you even know?
No, this is not my favorite. I don't know if I have a hierarchy. I do have a favorite, and I don't have a least favorite, and I don't think I have a hierarchy. I love the Phantom Menace for lots of reasons. I think it's quintessential Star Wars goodness, especially the ending, especially the last half hour, third act.
Hmm.
We'll start
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yep.
Phantom Menace comes out and is a spectacular opening in the theater. We went to see it in a stadium seating, and it was Southern California, really electrified crowd and super super hype. My wife had just seen Star Wars for the very first time in the theater for the special edition, the Empire, and
And Return of the
the
Jedi.
original, the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And so after the trilogy, everybody was hyped, and it was everywhere. It was on cereal boxes.
Hmm.
And then when it came out, it was we were able to walk in and see that like with the mainstream of the crowd with in a giant movie theater with probably 1,500 people in it, and everybody was really excited, and the special effects were spectacular. It was the very first movie ever that it was live action, but it had one main character all the way through the movie that was actually CG, and we'd never seen that before. That was the first time ever.
Hmm. Yeah, and my experience was a little bit different. I mean, I did see it in the theater. It was definitely hyped. Where I worked at the time was I was working for a distribution company for like fast food restaurants, but all of these fast food restaurants had Star Wars collectibles coming out and toys, uh, cards and everything. I felt like I knew more about the movie before it came out than after it came out. So.
I deliberately resist spoilers. Even if I'm looking right at them, I try not to comprehend them. I don't look close.
Yeah, I don't think I really knew what was going to happen. The only thing I knew was, Anakin was in it and he was basically a young Darth
Him.
Vader
Yeah, the
because,
posters.
the
We
poster.
talked about that before.
Yeah.
The poster with Anakin looking back with his backpack on, about
Yeah.
to leave on an adventure of a lifetime, casting the shadow of Darth Vader.
Yeah. And when that movie first came out, I'm going to admit it, I was not that happy with it, and I thought the poster was the best part of the movie. I will say right now, just before anyone has any thoughts about me, um, I have revisited it. I never loved it. I never hated it, but like it was definitely my least favorite. It still is my least favorite, but I have found some new respect for it in several sections of the movie. There are still things that bother me, a lot of things about it that bother me, but it's not. It used to be a movie that I didn't watch. I would like watch the rest of the movies, but I would skip the Phantom Menace completely because I just didn't care enough to watch it again. And that has changed. Now, when I watch the movies, I include the Phantom Menace for what it's worth.
See, that's progress. So then we're going to try to convince him the rest of the way, right, everyone? We're going to try to get him to watch it one more time and then fall in love with it.
Well, there's no need for me to convince me to watch it one more time. The next time I do a total rewatch of Star Wars, I will watch it again.
Oh,
But as
oh,
far
poo poo.
as
It's actually against the Constitution anyway, so we're not allowed to do that.
what what rewatch?
Convince you. That's
Oh,
against the Constitution, remember?
the Constitution?
Yeah, your Constitution,
Oh, I thought you were talking
your
about like
declaration of purpose, your declaration of
well,
purpose
yeah, that
for the
was
show. We're not going to convince each other.
yeah. Well, that was I assumed that you were
These are
joking.
jokes, Josh. Get
Yes.
up.
Oh, speaking of which, I did hear a joke this week, and I don't know if you've heard it, but I thought it was actually worthy of a chuckle. I'm not claiming ownership of this. I didn't invent it. I just saw it on Facebook, but I will repeat it. Um, so if R2 is short for R2D2 and Chewie is short for Chewbacca, and Annie is short for Anakin. What is Luke short for?
Am I supposed to guess?
Yeah,
Lucaton.
no, he's short for a stormtrooper.
Oh, he's short for a stormtrooper. All right. Yeah. You made me switch tracks. It's a Star Wars joke.
Yep. Sorry, just had to throw that in there. Um,
So you were a whiny, disgruntled Star Wars fan like right out the gate. So why don't we start there? I mean, I talked about how spectacular it was. Why
wait,
don't you
right
talk
out the
about what
gate?
actually? Yeah, right out the gate. You
Oh, well,
you
you mean
you
out of
did
the?
at the height of Star Wars popularity,
I think
right
maybe.
after the three movies had been re-released on the theater. You walked into Phantom Menace, and right there, you're not one of these many people who loved it and then walked away and then slowly went, I don't know, and then thought about it and saw it a few more times and then kind of turned against it. You were right off the bat a disgruntled Star Wars fan.
Yeah,
So let's hear about it.
I
Let's find out why.
misunderstood. I did misunderstand you because I thought you meant like right out of the gate, like 1977. Um,
No,
but that's
let's
my
find out
mistake.
why.
So there were a lot of things that seemed inconsistent to me, and I admit like some of those things were my own feelings that were wrong. I didn't like some of the performances, although they weren't the actors' fault. I think it was the directors. Um, I didn't like some of the logical situations.
Specific.
I didn't think that characters were making logical decisions based on who they were or the situations. So
Okay,
and we can get into that, but they were things that
we're
when I
gonna have
first saw
to.
it, yeah, when I first saw it, I came out of the theater thinking something's wrong. Like I came out and I didn't feel like I hated it, but I was like, that was not as good as I thought it was going to be. And I was married at the time, and I was telling her, and she didn't. I mean, my ex did not like Star Wars to begin with, so it was really no stretch for her to say that it was a stupid movie. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't know if I'd go so
So
far
you're
as
with bad company. That's a start right
maybe,
there. That'll
maybe.
ruin anything.
But I also
Okay,
came
keep
away
going.
with it, and I was thinking to myself, like, I saw some good stuff in there, but overall it didn't feel like Star Wars and it didn't feel satisfying at all. And
Wow, wait a minute. Whoa. I got to park back there for a minute. Did you just say the Phantom Menace did not feel like Star Wars?
to me, it did not feel like Star Wars.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was
Logged.
something I noted when you
Proceed.
said it felt like Star Wars, and I felt exactly the opposite when I saw it the first time. I
That
was
is
like,
crazy.
this
I
is
wonder how many people out there think that's crazy and how many people see your point. That's a
I don't
curious
know.
thing to me.
And I'm not, again, we've reiterated this many times. I'm not saying you're wrong. Maybe I'm
I
wrong,
get it.
and
Yep.
it's
No,
all a
I get it.
matter of taste. But
That's why I'm just accepting
yeah,
your opinion and moving on. I just want to make note of that.
for a
That's all.
while I couldn't even put my finger on what I didn't like. But more and more, I kept coming to the conclusion that characters did things that didn't make sense based on what I knew of them.
Give me an
Some of
example.
Well, I want to
Let's
give you
let's
examples, but
park.
I wasn't sure if I should wait until we get to those parts
Oh,
in the movies.
well, we're there. Well, we're here. We're there.
Okay.
We're there right now.
Okay. Well, one of the things I didn't like, and before we get too far into it, I do want to say in some of these cases, I might sound like I'm quoting a certain epic review of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. It was an hour and a half review posted on Red Letter Media, which was very, very funny. But also, when I watched it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. This is part of why I thought this movie was garbage. And for a while, I did think it was garbage, and then I kind of changed my mind. So the first thing, and
So
I
then you
said this
sought out public opinion that was negative, and you got dosed with it. So that kind of amplified it. That gave you warp speed.
possibly,
I'm following.
or at the very least, it made my opinions grow. Like I felt like this was something that was verifying. It wasn't just me. I
Yeah, I get
wasn't
it.
the
I
only
get it.
person who's
That's
seeing
one
it.
thing that we all know the internet does
Yeah,
is validate anything that we want to think or believe because we can find people that share it.
yeah.
But
Um,
anyway, that doesn't invalidate it. So go ahead.
so the first thing we see in the movie was part of my complaints, and I said this a bit about Return of the Jedi as well, but it's even more obvious to me in The Phantom Menace, and that is the opening, which I thought was completely uninspired, uninteresting, even more so than Return of the Jedi. You remember how much I love the opening of A New Hope, and we talked about the low angles and all of that. And in the Return of the Jedi, I felt like the angles were still kind of flat. They weren't as interesting, but we did get a good shot of the Star Destroyer looming over the camera, and of course the Death Star hovering above everything. But no close-up shots of it, which I thought hurt the whole thing. But uh, but in this movie, we've got none of that. We have a completely flat angle of a ship we're unfamiliar with going to another ship that we're unfamiliar with. We get a little bit of dialogue about landing procedures, which is completely irrelevant. We know that they're going to be cleared to land because they're going to land. That's it. And
You are really coding the spectacular opening with bitterness.
I
That is
I don't
crazy.
know. I was like watching it and I'm like, what am I watching?
Okay,
I
okay.
mean, it
So
was
let me so
bad
let me
enough.
say so okay, let me define the exact same scene in a completely different way. You show up to the theater and the lights go out and blam in a blast Star Wars hits the screen again for the fourth
You're
time.
talking about the
For the
music.
first original time Star Wars, the yellow letters in space explode on the screen with John Williams score, and it
I didn't
doesn't
complain
matter if
about
you're
that.
in 2025 and you're on, no, you didn't even mention it. It doesn't matter if you're in 2025 and watching it on a big screen. It is spectacular and it's thrilling to think after that complete trilogy where there was a resolution and an end of the story that we get more and it's original. So all of a sudden Star Wars is back, and then the crawl begins and it's like home again. It's like familiar, and then you're in space, so that's where every good story begins. And then a brand new, spectacular, obviously Carillion design flies by. And if you love Star Wars, then you look at that and you go, that's from that galaxy. We're here. We're in the galaxy. And then you get this amazing multi-second shot of the hangar bay of this ship, and the hangar bay has got these like droids that are giant spiders, but they look like they might be transformers, and then it's got this all these like skeletons, these metal skeletons holding guns, and it's like, whoa, what was that? Because you've never seen the droid army before. So it's
Hmm.
like that's the first glance of the droid army. That's the first glance of the Nemoidians. I got to admit, at some point, the Nemoidian begins to talk. And at the time, that was like the first pang of, oh, what went wrong here? Because the way, because they deliberately, George deliberately decided to use practical effects on the Nemoidians, which I understand he wasn't he didn't want to launch the entire production into CG. He wanted to have it rooted in many ways to the original.
Hmm.
But because of that, the watching the mouth of the Nemoidians move like a Muppet is not as convincing. That's the only first complaint that I would have. But everything else about that opening is spectacular.
Well,
It's not a battle.
part of why I wanted to skip the music was simply because you were asking me what was wrong. I didn't have any problem with the opening. I love John Williams. I will never say anything bad about him. And when I was in the theater and the Star Wars logo showed up with the blast of music and we got the opening crawl, I was very happy at that point. The only thing I was questioning is why were we talking about taxation? Why are we talking about anything like that? Because like that seemed boring to me. Taxes are not fun, but I was willing to go with it because, this is the beginning of a story. I mean, this is how wars start.
taxation
This is how wars
taxation
start.
is a real element that drives politics, and politics is what drives wars.
I know
So
that.
it is,
Yeah, and
we're back before the wars started,
yes,
really.
yes.
And so yeah,
But
why would taxes be something boring?
well, for me, like I was going in, I don't know what I was expecting. And so maybe that is me, but I saw it,
Okay,
and like
okay.
I said, I was not upset when I saw taxation, but I was kind of like, huh. Like, okay, epic yellow crawl is coming up, epic music, and we're talking about taxes and trade disputes, and kind of like, all right, okay, but
Well,
I
wait a
wasn't
minute,
tuned
wait a
out,
minute. There is
but
the
but
word blockade does appear in the crawl, and that's when it
yeah,
should
yeah.
be exciting by then. Blockade.
Yeah,
Blockade's interesting.
but then what we got was a ship that I didn't feel like it looked Corellian. I thought it looked completely foreign. I didn't
Come
have a
on.
problem. I didn't have a problem with yeah, with the design of that ship, the ship from Coruscant. But although I did not particularly like the design of the ship they were headed to, the droid control command ship, which looks kind of like a donut with the donut hole still in it and a bite taken out of it. I wasn't that
Oh
like
yeah,
I
yeah. The
didn't
droid
think that
control ship is cool.
I didn't think it was that cool. I didn't
What
think
are
it
you
was.
talking about? Did you think the Mon Calamari cruisers were cool? They look like pickles. It's Star Wars, dude. It's
I don't.
space. They don't have to
That's
be
I think that's
aerodynamic.
the thing. The Mon
I
Calamari
love the
ships.
spheres that in the droid control ships, the spheres that come down and land. That's a cool concept. And then that's where the whole control station is. So when they take off and go into orbit, they dock with the giant U, and it's got like bays on both sides.
But we
It's a
didn't
cool
see that in
design.
the first movie.
What? You
We,
saw the entire thing inside and out in the first movie. What are you talking about?
the center of the command
Anakin
ship
lands in
landing.
it in the end. Yeah,
Huh?
no. We didn't see that till no. We didn't
We
see
didn't
that.
see that
I'm
until
just making
until the
I'm
Clone
making a
Wars. Yeah.
I'm making a comment in advance that we know that later. It's like a piece of lore that was able to be developed in a second movie
Yeah,
about that
yeah,
ship because it was so cool.
yeah. But like I said, I revisited this movie, and to be fair, not right away. Not even when Attack of the Clones came out. It was still a while. But I did revisit the movie, and I liked it more the second time. But you asked, what are the things that I
Yeah.
found unsettling? This was one
Yep.
of
I
them.
got you.
But then we got
Okay.
past that, and we got to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan being led into a room to await their dispute,
By a droid that looks just like
just like
C-3PO.
C-3PO.
Ah, look
Yeah,
at that. It's another version of those
Easter
things.
egg,
Yep.
yes, and I didn't have a problem with that. That was fine. Obi-Wan said, "I feel like there's something strange going on."
Don't center on your anxiety, Obi-Wan. Keep your mind
Yeah,
here and now in the moment where it belongs. I love that. Right off the bat, I was getting like wisdom from Star Wars, which is what I would have expected.
yeah, that wasn't the problem. But then a second later, Palpatine, well, we didn't know it was Palpatine yet. Well, we knew it was Palpatine. Who are we
Kill them
kidding?
immediately.
Says kill them immediately. So what do the Neomoidians decide to do? Well, first, let's loudly blow up the ship they came in to alert them to danger. Because Jedi
First,
aren't,
let's cut off their escape and make sure there's no way they're getting away.
if they had not
I'm
blown
sorry,
up
that's a
that
different
ship,
interpretation.
if they had not blown up that ship, the Jedi would have sat there feeling uneasy and drinking the tea that was put in front of them that they could have put rat poison in, but they didn't. And then they throw in a
They
very
would have known it.
obvious, and then they throw in a very obvious white gas, which,
Yeah, well,
like,
they're sealed.
carbon monoxide. It's odorless and colorless. It would have killed them, and they would not have even known
It
that they
wouldn't
were
have
dead.
mattered. They're freaking Jedi. It
They
doesn't. It wouldn't
they
have
wouldn't have
mattered.
noticed because
They
they wouldn't have
probably
been.
used they probably the Neomodians are cowards. Qui-Gon called it. Um, they probably used the gas that was going to kill them the most. It turns out to be dioxine or
Yeah,
dioxazine or whatever Qui-Gon
dioxin.
called
Yeah,
it. Dioxazine,
which
dioxazine.
also doesn't make sense. How does he know it's dioxin unless he smelled it? And if he smelled it, then isn't it a little bit late?
Oh my God!
But in
Because
any
they're
case,
Jedi, dude.
I didn't get that.
They are using the Force. The Force is connected to all living things.
The Force, it's
It's
just, it
they
didn't sound
reach
like it to
out
me.
with their
The
feelings. What do you think
whole,
they're
but
reaching
the
out
whole
to?
point was that
They
it
have
seemed like,
sensors.
but it seemed like the whole thing was one bad decision after another on the part of the
Okay,
Neomoidians.
all right. Well, that's how you see it. I can't
Because they
see it
blew
that
up
way.
the ship and told the Jedi, there's a problem. We've just blown up your ship. Here, ignite your lightsabers because you know there's danger. Instead of sitting there quietly, drinking the tea, and waiting for the inevitable, the Jedi weren't even at it, like they felt uneasy, but they still went along with it and were just sitting there quietly.
I'm looking.
If they had,
I'm looking at the cruiser right now. The one that they were in. The Radiant Four. It's called. This is so Star Wars. It's a consular class light cruiser from Corellia.
I'm not
Obviously
arguing that
Corellian.
it's from Corellia, but I didn't get that. Like watching the movie,
It's a
like
you could look right at it and tell it has a lot of things in common with Corellian ships. It's just such a familiar Star Warsy kind of design.
I don't think, well, I know I didn't get that because to this day I watched the movie and I've seen that ship and it still doesn't strike me as that familiar. But again, I'm not saying you're wrong. It just didn't hit me that way. But it
Did you
felt,
did you feel that way about the Naboo cruiser that like
you mean
uh
the Nubian or
Padme's ship?
the silver one, the Nubian?
Yeah, the silver one. Yeah.
No, I didn't think it looked familiar either.
Well, it didn't because it was from a
Naboo.
different planet that we
Yeah.
hadn't seen in the first three movies.
Yeah.
So are we resisting like new things in Star Wars?
No, no, I'm not resisting it. It's just that it was a ship that I didn't care about, and they were talking about docking
Well,
procedures that I didn't care about.
yeah,
Um,
it's good. It's good that you didn't care about it because it didn't last very long.
no, that's true. They were pretty much one and done characters. But it's still, it just like it seemed like the Neomoidians were doing their utmost best to make stupid decisions so that the Jedi would have the easiest time possible. Some of it I know was,
Well, come on,
I
dude. The
mean,
Neimoidians are stupid. I hate
yes,
those guys.
yeah, yeah.
They are a cowardly, manipulative, opportunistic race, and they don't seem particularly bright. They don't do their own work, so that tells me that they probably bartered a lot of their technology. They're out in space, wreaking havoc with everybody, working with the Trade Federation. Pure examples of greed and stupidity. I think is a good
Hmm.
way to put it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the droid army wasn't theirs. It was created by was it
No, no, they didn't do
the
nothing. But
technology
they didn't do
union or
nothing but
something, right?
stand in the position of command. That's the only thing they did.
Yeah. Um, but
We're supposed to hate them.
yeah, but it's just like a bunch of decisions that just seem to make things like make no sense to me. Then on top of that, and this, I was very like researching it. I was very undecided on how I felt about it when the Jedi start fighting the droids because they have no problem. They just swipe through them, and even George Lucas went on record saying
Yep,
he wanted them to slice through them
cut
like
like butter.
butter. Yep, like there
Yep,
was absolutely no threat to them. So on one hand,
yep.
I can see his desire to make the Jedi look this powerful. They're badass, and the droids have no chance against them. And on that, I understand why he's doing it. And at the same time, you're removing any kind of conflict. It's not fun to watch a one-sided battle where there is no question of the outcome. So it kind of takes away the urgency because it seems like the Jedi can just walk through this army. There is no danger to them. But again, that doesn't last long either because then finally we get the
Eh,
droidicas, the
yep,
they're called
yep.
destroyers,
That
right?
doesn't last long.
Yeah,
The
and then the
destroyers, yep.
destroyers were a little more interesting because they rolled around, which was interesting, and they had the
Yeah.
shields.
Well, that's how you start an adventure on level one. You know what I mean? So like we get to see the Jedi doing what the Jedi do. We get
Yeah,
to see them doing something that we've only heard legends about, that we've only read in books, that we've only played in video games.
yeah,
We
and we
finally
have
get to see the Jedi
what
in action.
Obi-Wan
And so
described.
he gives them a opening scene with a bunch of robot skeletons so that they can cut through them and we can see them being badasses, and
Yeah,
then immediately after that he kicks up the tension by bringing up the droidicas. Did you
yeah,
know that those things are built by the race that built them? They were all built to look like the race that they built them. They're all like they're like biological insects that walk on three legs. They're savages, and they actually curl up biologically and roll around. They're the ones that built the droidicas.
I thought they were built by the technological union or whatever it was called. The-
Negative. Look it up. It's
I
actually
believe you.
I'm
I
talking
just don't
I'm
remember.
talking about canon stuff
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
It's interesting.
yeah. I'm not saying
There's
you're
whole
wrong.
packs. This is what I love about Star Wars. Exactly this. I just dug up just on a whim. I dug up tons of information about this ship that I didn't even realize was called the Radiant Four, the
Mhm.
one that got blown up
Yeah,
in the beginning. But like this totally unnecessary piece of canon information you could find on multiple different forms of media, including the Wikipedia. But the whole story behind the alien race that built the droidicas is exactly what I love about Star Wars. Just everything is so deep and alive, and there's so many crisscrossing little pieces of information and details and characters and places, and it just creates this interconnected world where anything can happen.
yeah. I do
So anyway,
appreciate.
little details.
Yeah, I do appreciate the lore that has come out of it, but that's another story.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and so I just want to say we're not even like 5 minutes into the movie yet, and we're already tasting Star Wars in so many different dimensions. It's unmistakable.
yeah, well, like I said, so I had mixed feelings about the fight against the droids because there was no sense of urgency because they had so little effect on the Jedi. But I understand
Okay, back to
what
that.
George Lucas was trying to do, so it's not a major complaint. But then
All right.
the two Jedi get to the hangar and they find out that they are planning an invasion. And
Yeah,
Qui-Gon
let's get
says,
planet side.
"Yeah, but how are we going to do that? Well, let's get on separate ships. Why? Why get on separate ships? There's a whole planet
To
there,
maximize the chance of the mission succeeding. If anything goes wrong and one of them survived, at least the other one would be able to get the message back.
but they
That's why.
immediately it seems more like there was 100% chance that they would not land in the same area of the planet and they would have a hard time finding each other. Their chances of being caught increased because if either one of them got caught, the droids would alert the rest of the droids. There are Jedi here. They escaped the ship. Now look for the other one. It just
And
seemed
yet
like,
there were only enough landing ships to conquer one small area of Naboo, and they specifically targeted Theed, the capital. So
mhm,
they all landed in exactly
yeah,
the same place in exactly the same forest, which is probably something the Jedi would have had figured out.
it just didn't seem like that to me. I mean, it seemed like
Okay.
there was no reason to go on two different ships, but they landed and they found each other anyway. So the whole point that they were on separate ships wasn't even necessary. And then we
Mm-hmm.
get Jar Jar. And let me be the
Mm-hmm.
first to say, I have never once in my entire life felt the need to bully Ahmed Best for his performance as Jar Jar. I will go on record, even back then, of saying I can commend him for his work. He did a great job creating the character. I never
Yeah.
liked the
Why would
character,
anybody
but
even
people
think about
did,
doing
though.
something like that?
But people did. And I don't know
Hmm.
how much of it was true,
I
but
can't even comprehend that.
I don't know how much of this was true, but he has said, Ahmed Best has said that he was suicidal for a time because of the outburst of hate against him for Jar Jar. He didn't write that
And
character.
it was really triumphant when they brought him back into the TV shows
Oh yeah,
recently. That was so cool to
yeah, it
see him
was
back in.
really good.
Especially since they gave him a chance to wield a lightsaber and be a
Hmm.
badass.
Yeah,
That was just such a cherry on the cake for me.
yeah, but see, even before episode one came out, Ahmed Best was doing what were they called? Like video diaries of the making of the movie. So I knew what his voice was like. I knew what he looked like. So when I heard him voicing Jar Jar, the first thought was, boy, the guy really knows how to change his voice. Like he did a great job with that. My problems with Jar Jar, and there were a number. I'm a lot of times something that I don't like is when I say I don't like the Phantom Menace, the first thing everyone assumes is that it's all because of Jar Jar. I didn't like Jar Jar, I'm willing to admit that, but he isn't the main reason I didn't like the movie. He is one of many. But I don't blame Ahmed Best for it. I blame George Lucas for it.
Okay, well,
Ahmed Best did a great job
okay,
as
all
the
right, all right.
character.
That's
So,
this is not a helpful train of thinking. Instead of admitting why we're not running around and like slaughtering people in our neighborhood, let's talk about what actually happened. So we have Jar Jar coming at us because he's being chased by a bunch of
droids,
mechaniques,
yeah, yeah.
and all the other animals are charging with them. And all the other animals are freaking out. He's not actually a non-technological creature, but he is an idiot. So he's freaking out with the animals,
Mhm.
and we get knocked out. Now, if you could describe exactly why anything is wrong so far, that would be helpful. And then we can move on to the actual Gungan Kingdom, which is an ingenious and beautiful piece of art, and it absolutely, it fleshes out and improves the Star Wars galaxy. It adds a brand new, beautiful location.
I do
Really
like the
exotic, something
location.
like unlike anything we've ever seen before. But
Yeah,
let's start with Jar Jar and talk about exactly why anything is wrong with what is happening right here.
well, as you said, he's an idiot, and the problem I have with it is he's very obviously just there for the comedy and to appeal to young kids. He's a cartoon rabbit who steps
I'm
in
sorry, should
crap.
there not be comic relief?
I didn't say that,
He's not a
but
rabbit. He's not a rabbit. He
he
doesn't look
looks
anything like
he
a
looks
rabbit.
like an alien rabbit with the long ears, and he steps in crap literally halfway through the movie.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, because he's an idiot.
yeah, I don't like seeing complete idiots in a
What's
movie.
wrong with comic relief?
I don't have a problem with comic relief if it makes sense, but I didn't like the way Jar Jar was. like he had no reason to be there, at least not to hang out. He should have thanked the Jedi and left because there was no need for him. He had no business being with the Jedi. He was
Well, there
completely out of his
was a
depth.
need. No, no, no. There was a need. He is the one that got the Jedi to the first civilization, which was the Gungans. But I will say, fast forwarding a little bit, that when they see Big Boss and he uses the Force to tell him to make Jar Jar come with us,
Mhm.
the point of that was to save Jar Jar's life and to have a guide. But after that, Lucas fails to allow
Yeah, Jar Jar
Jar
never
Jar
guides them.
to guide them in any way. And that's just such an easy thing. It's such a big oversight. One little scene in the water where one of them goes, "Hey, here comes the left or right. Do we go left or right?" And he goes, "I think you go that way." And that's the way they go. That's all it would have been, just
Hmm.
something. But there wasn't a single moment where Jar Jar actually guided them, which means by the time they get to Theed, on one hand, it's like, well, I guess Jar Jar's kind of useless, but we already knew that. But the real problem is like, what is Qui Gon doing? Why did he bring him? Why is he still bringing him? Like he didn't
Exactly.
need him to as a guide at all. That I understand and I have thought myself, but that's separate from this whole knocking him down and then taking him down to the kingdom. At this point, he really is a necessary aspect of the story.
Yeah,
He's moving us to Gungan City.
I don't think that there would be nearly as much hatred for him if he had shown them to the Gungan city, gotten them out of it, and then left. If he had left the movie at that point, it would have been fine, and no one would have hated him because a comic relief character of an idiot is fine in small bursts, but making a whole movie of it, it gets really irritating really quickly. And
Well,
halfway
wait a
through the
minute.
movie,
It's
I was kind of
we
like,
do
shut up, Jar
realize that
Jar.
Lucas is making these serial style comic book movies from the 1930s primarily for kids, and the reason why you and I still like it is because we are kids at heart. It's primarily for kids. Jar
Yeah,
Jar was not was supposed to be something that made the Phantom Menace a family movie. It was a family movie, and there are many kids that have got a big kick out of Jar Jar until they get older, and then they get all embarrassed that they got a big kick out of Jar Jar and then turn against him.
yeah, but there's a point when it goes to excess. For example, and I know I said I'm not going to get off topic. This is just a very minor aside. If you look at the the first two Superman movies, okay, you've got Lex Luthor, the main bad guy who is a formidable foe for Superman, and he surrounds himself with the dumbest henchmen in the world before the Minions came out. Otis, who is completely useless as a henchman. He's there specifically to be an idiot, and it takes away any credibility that Lex Luthor has. I still love the movie, but Otis is my least favorite character because he is completely inane. He has no meaning being there. They could have pulled him out of the movie, and it wouldn't have made a difference. But again, it's the same thing with Jar Jar. He's over the top stupid. He's an over the top idiot, and that takes away from the movie, I think.
I got it right here, Mr. Luthor.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
oh,
there are
well,
funny
okay,
lines,
fine, I
but it
guess,
takes
but
away
I don't
the.
know. I think this is not a Superman conversation, but I
No,
think
no,
Otis
but
actually does do something for the movie. I think that his character is, I've been watching that movie since I was a little kid, and so anyway, I'm not going to talk about Superman, but I think that Jar Jar served a purpose in the story, and I think that it's not my story; it's his story. Not Jar Jar's. It's Lucas's story. So
yeah,
like, I mean, he's the one telling the story, and he says Jar Jar's in it. So I'm here to watch the story, and as the story unfolds, there's Jar Jar. So I
yeah,
accept the fact that we have this bumbling moron in our midst, and there are many moments where he not only does things that are pointless, but also actually actively gets them into trouble.
yep,
And so, bringing him along really needed to have a motivation. We get that motivation later in the movie, which is little solace because we needed more confirmation from Jar Jar that there was a reason why he was in the movie. But at some point in the movie, he's really the one that triggers all the victory over the Trade Federation. He is the trigger. So we get that reward, but I think Lucas maybe stretches that rubber band back a little bit too far. I think it snaps a little bit before you get that reward at the end.
hmm and that's so. I mean, you asked. That's why I don't like Jar Jar. That's what's wrong with
Yeah,
him.
well,
I
no,
think
it's
he was,
important. That's what we're
yeah,
talking about.
he was too far over the edge, and I think maybe
Fine.
that might
Okay.
be. maybe that's the problem I have with Lucas in The Phantom Menace is that he doesn't know when to quit. Instead of making a
Well, let's move
character,
on to
yeah.
Good City.
Hey, this is Josh. I want to thank you for listening to part one of my discussion with Vern about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And next week we will be continuing our discussion of the movie. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, make tomorrow better than yesterday.